After a couple appearances on NXT, is WWE preparing Gable Steveson for his in-ring debut? We're going to talk about it and much more on today's episode of WrstlXtra. Stay tuned.
Yo, this is a WrstlXtra. I'm your boy, A Dazzle, the Black Wrestling Advocate, always joined by my trios team, Mix, the WrestleManiac, if you will. And of course, the professor, that is Gerard Bonner. You know what? I almost said, yeah, after doing that, you know.
The amount of times I said, yeah, this past weekend. Honestly.
Right. It's a thing. It's a thing.
It is. Definitely is. Yo, this is WrstlXtra. We have come away from Money in the Bank, which took place in Mex's hometown of London, England. Unfortunately, not mine. But it was down the road from me, kind of. Money in the Bank was, I would say, a decent pay-per-view. More than enough highlights, good matches, good things to talk about. But on this show, of course, we know that our focus is our Black Stars. And I must say, it was something that we mentioned in our chat during the week. There wasn't much of us on that card, unfortunately. But at the same time, we can mention one of our favorites, that is Ricochet, who was in the men's Money in the Bank match, which was the first match on the card, and a very exciting match, as expected. And also, we had Logan Paul in that match, which gave us the expectation, following their thing at Royal Rumble, some kind of spot confrontation, big moment with Logan Paul and a Ricochet. And we got that. We got it. But was it to its full 100%? That's been the talk since it happened. For those that don't know, who have been living under a rock and have not yet seen Money in the Bank, there was a spot with Logan Paul and Ricochet, both at the top of the ladder. The ladder was pushed down, I believe, by LA Knight. Yeah. And it led to what was supposed to be a spot with Ricochet and Logan Paul. Ricochet hitting a Spanish fly on Logan Paul into two tables on the outside of the ring. It didn't quite go as planned. Still looked phenomenal. Still looked amazing. But again, it's been the talk of the wrestling world for the last few days since the evening. Gerard, I'm gonna go to you first. Just give me a rundown of what happened on that spot. Why didn't it go well? What went wrong? And what you thought of that whole thing in general.
Well, I'll say this. I mean, first of all, we know that Money in the Bank ladder matches, or any ladder match, period, can be wildly unpredictable. Right. Many things will happen that aren't planned. My brain immediately goes back to, sorry if this is too long ago for some people, but it's such an iconic moment. WrestleMania 17. It's a triple threat ladder match that happened with Edge and Christian, the Hardys, the Dudleys, the whole TLC thing. And Jeff Hardy was trying to walk from the top of one ladder to the top of another ladder to do this move, and we'll never know what was supposed to happen because he fell in between the two ladders. I mean, ladders are unpredictable. And so with Ricochet and Logan Paul falling off of the ladder, as fans, we didn't know what was supposed to happen from there. But from there, part of what happened was when they went to do the Spanish fly, it was really from the middle rope instead of the top rope. And so naturally, they didn't get the kind of height you needed to do the full turn. So they ended up going head first, which I think probably would have created a more viral moment the way that it ended up happening than if they had done it beautifully and, you know, that kind of thing. So I think they were just a victim of unpredictable ladders. And again, trying to operate in certain moments, which I'm sure Mex will allude to some of the comments from Logan Paul. But in terms of the moment itself, I think Ricochet pulled it off, obviously. And the issue really is that it happened from that middle rope and not from the top rope. So, you know, science did what it does. If you don't have enough height and room, then you can only, you know, turn so far. And I think that's ultimately what happened.
Next, let's go to that. So Logan Paul, as we know, is a YouTube sensation, very much known for, is very much known for his YouTube show Implosive. I think Impulsive even.
Yes.
And he commented, of course, a couple of days later on the move, on the match, what kind of didn't work, and also what has transpired since then. So Mix, give us a rundown of what the Maverick has said about that whole situation.
Yeah, he's come across like, you know, it was very dangerous of Ricochet to do something like that. It's very unprofessional is the word he used. And look, I personally think he's working. I personally think that this is, you know, him calling out Ricochet on his show. Maybe there's a longer term story here between the two of them. SummerSlam's the next event. They've been telling this story of who's the best athlete. Wouldn't surprise me, you know, if Ricochet turns up on Impulsive within the next few weeks. Ricochet's already called him out on Raw. So I just think this is some good work by a very popular guy, and gives Ricochet a really cool, interesting spot if it does get to SummerSlam. I think we all know that Ricochet is highly favored by Triple H. You know, Triple H has always kind of looked after him where he could. So getting Logan Paul to do something like this, I think it's Logan Paul being Logan Paul, getting people talking, getting people to hate him. At the same time, this is some good work, I would say, for Ricochet. So, like I said, he's called out. Ricochet's called out Logan Paul. You'd expect Logan Paul to be on the show in the next 4 to 5 weeks before SummerSlam. So maybe that's what they're building towards, which is great for Ricochet because, you know, without Logan Paul, he probably doesn't make that card. So yeah, it's a good spot to be in.
Most definitely. So Logan Paul on his show, he explained what didn't quite go right in terms of them falling off the ladder. Both feet were supposed to hit on the top rope. Ricochet landed just a little bit before him, which meant both of them, their legs slipped to the bottom, the second rope even. And, you know, Logan Paul was saying, during the moment, he was like, right, this is messed up. We're gonna lose it. But then Ricochet, being Ricochet, being a wrestler that he is, professional, and as experienced as he is, Ricochet is not gonna let a little slip spoil the moment. So he went for it. Logan Paul, of course, has only been doing this for not even a year, had about 4 or 5 matches. He doesn't know how to improv, especially in a type of spot like that as well. So Ricochet went ahead and carried on. What's beautiful, and this is the art of professional wrestling for me, is that, you know, we've seen I believe a video, it's probably on WWE online, where, you know, the two of them have had some confrontation backstage, and now we're ending up getting, you know, Ricochet and Logan Paul face to face on Raw next week. So from what Mix was saying, Logan Paul was definitely, you know, pushing the final comments of what he said about Ricochet being unprofessional, messing up the match for him, all that kind of stuff was definitely part of the work. And again, this is what is the beauty of professional wrestling. We get stuff that doesn't quite go to plan, but yet we can still make something out of it. And this is what we're getting. So Gerard, Mix mentioned the possibility of Ricochet versus Logan Paul at SummerSlam. Is this what needs to happen? And how important is this, as Mix said, for Ricochet? Because maybe we wouldn't get any, Ricochet on SummerSlam if not for this possibility of Logan Paul Ricochet happening.
Do we need this match? I don't know that we need the match, but I do feel like it is a great way to make lemonade from a lemon. And I think that that's the beauty of pro wrestling, is that you can take something that wasn't intended to go one way and make it look like, oh, we meant to do that. That's the beauty of live television and what this sport does. With that said, I think there's one thing that Logan Paul said in all of this that nobody's grabbing like they should, but I'm going to grab it. And that's this. He reiterated twice in his comments on his show, hey, I'm new. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm new. Now, we've never seen him be bold enough to say that. When he was fighting Roman Reigns last year, we didn't hear him say, I'm new. I don't know what I'm doing. Instead, it was, I can knock you out. One lucky punch. The Royal Rumble. I can win the Royal Rumble. Money in the Bank. Oh, I'm going to win the briefcase. Now you want to lean on the fact, sir, that you're new in hopes to potentially grab some sympathy from your followers. But what you've done for wrestling fans is you've proven what we have been saying the entire time. You're new. You don't know what you're doing. You just happen to be a great athlete. And I think a moment like what we saw in Money in the Bank proves the difference between a great athlete and a great wrestler. The ability to, change things on the fly. So to Mex's point, I actually think that this is good for Ricochet, simply because Ricochet has always had the it factor. I mean, we all know about that, the clips that we saw of him and Ospreay several years ago in New Japan, which turned a lot of people onto New Japan, introduced a lot of people to both Ospreay and Ricochet. He being Ricochet, hasn't had a viral mainstream moment quite like that ever since. Obviously the cool moment that happened during the Royal Rumble, but a match of that, I think this serves Ricochet far more than it serves Logan Paul. And whether Ricochet wins or loses, there's going to be enough moments that come out of this that go viral that will get people talking about Ricochet, which I think is a massive win in all of this.
And this is the great thing, going to what you said. It shows the difference between the professional and the athlete. Ricochet doing things off the fly or off the Spanish fly. If you want to go there.
I see what you did there.
I had to throw it. But here's the thing. You said in the first part of your comment, asking the question, do we need this? And I think in that last few sentences of your comment, it's exactly why we need it. Not just only it's serving good purpose for Ricochet, but us just having a match on the card of SummerSlam that is just going to be all the way exciting. However big or small, whatever the repercussions or the purposes, there's going to be no title involved. It's not going to be someone's going to become number one contender or anything like that. But at the same time, just knowing that we're going to have a match between these two guys who, just from one moment at Royal Rumble, almost made us want to see just them two go at it. Yeah. So for that to continue and it build to something like this, whether this was the intention or not, I think it would be in the best interest of WWE and especially for Ricochet, for this to happen. But at the same time as well, I think it's nice for Logan Paul to have a match with someone who isn't the biggest or one of the biggest stars in WWE, just to have something, just to have a match where it's not high stakes. It's not simply because they want bombs on seats in that respect, to, as when he faced Roman Reigns or Seth Rollins in the past. How important is it now, or what do you think now happens between these two guys leading up to the possible SummerSlam match? Do we see Logan Paul every week? Do we have to have, Logan Paul and Ricochet kind of at some kind of, whether it be physical, whether it be verbal, do they have to have something every single week leading up to the match?
I guess we know the answer, that we're not gonna get Logan Paul every week. Well, I don't know. I don't know where SmackDown is in New York at the end of this week. I don't know where Raw is come Monday. But you might see him in a few, big towns and stuff on the lead up to SummerSlam. What's interesting between the two of them, it will be the verbal jousting, because we know that that may not be Ricochet's strong spot. Could get exposed there. Not to say that Logan Paul's a lot more comfortable in trash talking and all that kind of stuff, but as a wrestling promo, I wouldn't say I've seen anything that really kind of blows me away from him either. But it's just a level of comfortability. This is a guy that's been on YouTube in front of cameras since he was a child. So you can imagine the level of experience there. It's very interesting how they're going to maybe take this opportunity, if they take this opportunity, to develop Ricochet's character. We saw more of a straight talking, no business Ricochet on Raw, backstage calling out Logan Paul. Are we going to kind of, I wouldn't say heel turn, but like we're seeing from Bianca now, just a bit more straight to the point, like, fierce, if you like. Are we going to get that from Ricochet just within this feud, or, maybe going forward, just a small little chink in or change in his character could probably help him. I don't know what at this point the ceiling is. I was talking to some guys earlier about Ricochet, and Ricochet's issue right now, I think he's been on the main roster for too long. Like, you can't just change his character like that. That's what I mean by that. Right. Because it was like, well, hold on, you're trying to push him as a superhero, you're trying to push him as all these other things. It's like, I don't know what's going to have to happen before you can actually really just change his character and kind of start again. Like a gimmick out of nowhere now would be a bit odd, even for us that we want something added to him. So just maybe turning it up a notch, if you like, could be the start of just something a bit more different, and that can change. But the back and forths will be very interesting, because we know that's not Ricochet's strong suit.
And what's interesting is this face to face. As you just said, it's not verbal, and on the mic hasn't been Ricochet's strongest point. We know Ricochet very well because of his time on the Indies, and that the Indies isn't dependent on how good you are on the mic; it's how good you are in the ring, and that's what he's mastered. Of course, WWE is a little bit more watered down in terms of the in-ring action and what you're able to do week to week and all that type of thing. So Ricochet's kind of missed out, or we've missed out, should I say? The fans have missed out on the greatness that was Ricochet before he was ever signed to any company. On NXT, we got to see quite a bit, but since this main roster, we've struggled in the biggest way. Massively, I guess, because one, weekly wrestling is very, very different to independent. Two, Vince McMahon isn't going to use Ricochet in any way, shape, or form the same way Triple H probably would have wanted to, or knows him for, and stuff like that. Vince McMahon probably didn't even know who he was. Let's be very real. Vince McMahon probably didn't even know who he was. So now that we're in this space where we're seeing Ricochet on a week-to-week basis, and is being used, how long do you think it will take before we see anything close? I don't even know if it would even happen, but anything close to the magnitude of a Ricochet on the independents. Gerard, what do you think?
Well, I don't want to downplay the opportunity for something quick to happen, and perhaps the best example of this is Shayna Baszler. From the way she turned on Ronda out of nowhere to the scathing promo she cut on Raw, which I don't know that any of us actually saw, Shayna cutting that kind of promo on anybody. So it makes me think that Shayna's been doing work backstage and somewhere. Perhaps Ricochet has also been doing work that we've not seen yet. And perhaps they're giving him this as the opportunity to show off your work. You know, it's like you've been working on this math problem and you only did it on your paper, and the teacher calls you up to the board and says, okay, show your work. That's really where we are right now with Ricochet. Show your work, sir. Let us see how you got here. Because think about what they're giving him. They are putting him against one of the most hated people in all of pro wrestling right now.
Right.
So that automatically makes you love him. So it seems to me, and run down the list of people who have had the privilege of fighting Logan Paul, The Miz, Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, and then this Money in the Bank match. All very high profile situations. So I think, you know, of course, and Rey Mysterio and Dom, right? So that's high praise for Ricochet to be in. I think perhaps he's been doing the work. We don't know it yet, but we'll get a chance to see it hopefully next week, because live television, face to face with someone who talks for a living, he's got to be able to bring something. Other than that, he's going to get cooked. And I mean, think about it. They just put Logan last week in a mic set situation with LA Knight. Yeah. Right. So because that says that they know Logan can talk. Yeah. This to me has to say that they know something about Ricochet that we currently don't know, and that hopefully we'll get a chance to see.
I think the beauty of this whole conundrum is the lead up to it will almost have to be Logan Paul doing the most, or the carrying, I guess, in that respect. But come the match, it has to be Ricochet.
Oh,
it has to be Ricochet. And I think that's the beauty of this whole thing, in terms of when Mex and we've all said how this is going to be more rewarding for Ricochet than Logan Paul, for sure, in the sense where Ricochet has to step up in his mic game. But then, as you said, Gerard, you know, he's being put in a position with Logan Paul, who has been bought into WWE for money. Right. He's surprised us all with how good he has been in the ring, of course. But the prime reason for it was to get bums on seats, eyes on the product, and all the rest of it. As you said, Miz, who is, you know, strongly associated with the Hollywood scene and celebrities, all the rest of it, which is a great way to bring Logan Paul in. Then we've had Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns, literally the two biggest stars in the company, probably aside from Brock Lesnar. And now Ricochet. It sounds wrong, but it's perfect.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's perfect. And as I said before, you know, this is the kind of thing I'd like to see as well for Logan Paul, in the sense where he is showing us that he can also be ready to face the lower card and not just expect to be at the top every single time, which is great to see for him as well.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see how this one goes, where it's going to go. If this face-to-face thing isn't just a one-time on Raw, and then we get a match between them maybe in 2 weeks and then nothing else. The SummerSlam match for me is what needs to happen. And it's great for both guys. It's great for both guys. Whether we see any type of character change, gimmick change, I don't think it's not going to be that far, as Mex said. But I think we just need to see some kind of development for Ricochet, not to show us what Ricochet is about, but I think for me more so for us to see how important Ricochet is to WWE. And I think that's the part that I'm confident about. So I think it's going to be great. Moving away from Money in the Bank, but keeping with the WWE, we might as well stay where we are right now. NXT happened yesterday as well. As Mex alluded to at the top of the show, the Olympic gold medalist Gable Steveson made his was not his debut, but you know, was on NXT, siding with Eddie Thorpe as he went against I forgot his brother.
Damon Kemp.
Damon Kemp.
Yes.
Real name Bobby Steveson, for those that don't know. The real brother of Gable Steveson. Mex, what was your take on this whole match, how it went down, and what transpired in this match?
It was really good. You know, compared to Raw Underground, like that we got, which had, you know, so much potential, but just literally in the wrong hands. Yeah, this was really good. The match went longer than any Raw Underground match ever went. The atmosphere that they created in the arena, even with the superstars around the ring beating the ring to the sound of Eddie Thorpe's music, I felt was really kind of a nice touch. And then, yeah, they had this kind of grappling fiasco within the ring, and very hard hitting moves that landed just outside the ring onto the mat, like just body slapping the ground. Like they really went for it. I think both men gave a really good account of themselves. Eddie Thorpe, since he's come into NXT, I haven't seen the hype. Like I don't know why. Like they seem to be giving him a lot in terms of a lot of TV time really soon. He can clearly wrestle. He looks like relatively polished in the ring. Character wise, the DJ thing, I don't really feel it too tough. But he made an impression on me with this match. I think Damon Kemp as well, he's done a really good job ever since he's come in. It's like they haven't really found a spot for him. He's just like an annoying little someone that just comes around and just annoys people. But I feel like he's got a lot of potential, you know, ultimately so much so more than Gable, because he made his debut and we're still waiting for Gable.
Right.
So yeah, I wish in general Diamond Mine worked, because I just thought that idea was brilliant. And then Gable's inclusion in all of this was obviously he was the one that got the fight camp ready. No one knows Damon Kemp better than me, but they don't want to kind of let us know that they're brothers.
Right.
like, come on. Yeah, he had little parts to play here, and then obviously he got his bit at the end, suplexing everyone and roaring out to the crowd and stuff like that. Yeah, it makes me feel like, I don't know, is this how they kind of want to begin to introduce him in some capacity? But as a match, I feel like this was very good. I feel like they've almost kind of put themselves in a situation like they should need to use this more often as like a blow off kind of match, feuds and stuff like that. Yeah, they done a good job. Everyone involved done a really good job.
As you said, it was so much better than the Raw Underground stuff that we've seen. When I first heard we're gonna have an Underground match and they showed things, I was like, why are we doing this? But at the same time, it worked so well. For those who probably haven't seen anything like this, obviously it was a match where there was no ring ropes, no turnbuckles, no nothing, just a mat. Almost and then almost like a lumberjack type situation with people around the ring. They didn't get involved when anyone went out of the ring, but it was that type of thing visually. And recently, for those that don't know, who don't really follow any of the indie stuff or whatever else, for those who know about Bloodsport, I think that's kind of made this whole thing a bit more popular again. It's a lot more violent and a lot more raw. Sorry to use the pun, I didn't even mean that. But it's a lot more raw in its delivery. But at the same time, I think what these two guys did was perfect, and I think it would be interesting. Remember the Matt Riddle and Timothy Thatcher having their whole thing? If they had a match like that, I think it would have been even better. But so to have Damon Kemp, who has obviously all his experience in amateur wrestling, come into this is great. To give the flowers to Damon Kemp, he's coming in as the brother of an Olympic champion. So we were expecting him to be second fiddle and blah blah blah. I guess it's worked in his favor that Gable hasn't been around necessarily, but he has done everything he's needed to do and as much as he's been able to do. During his time in NXT, and I think this match highlighted that in a massive way. My only disappointment with this whole thing is, I know we all know that they're brothers in real life. and it may happen in time and blah 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 and all the rest of it. But I would have rather it just happened on yesterday, just straight away. Gable takes out Thorpe in some kind of way, and them two kind of, were brothers, or even if it's not brothers, but friends or whatever. Gerard, do you think that was missing? Can it happen later on? What are we? I'm just confused about this whole little we're brothers, but we're not brothers, and we don't want to tell you that we're brothers. But anyway, yeah.
It's so funny. I watched that match fully expecting Gable Steveson to turn. Like I watched every move he made because I was like, surely now is the time. Surely now is the time. And they didn't pull that trigger, which I mean is okay. I think there's probably still time to do it. It kind of reminds me of, when Braun Breaker debuted and they would just start making references to dog-faced gremlins, right? And then finally they just, finally said, all right, that's his dad, and that type of thing. So I think in time we'll get to that if we don't end up seeing a brother versus brother match, which I think would be very entertaining. And maybe after that, they realize, hey, we're better together than apart, So I'm intrigued to see where that will go. I do think that probably the reason Gable Steveson did not do that is because they really want to build him as this happy-go-lucky, wonderful Olympic gold medalist that we can get behind. And so him associating with Damon Kemp in any way would kind of throw that apart. Even if they acknowledge that they're brothers, even though, I mean, they stand right next to each other, you're like, are y'all twins? Because they look that much alike, right? So I was with you when I watched it. I was like, surely now's the moment. But I still think there's time to do it. Particularly, I think it may depend on how the people respond to Gable Steveson. Yeah. If they have a moment with him like they had with Angle, where they can't get him over, and it only makes sense for him to turn, then I think we see that happen.
Yeah. And the other thing we have to remember as well is quite recently, Gable Steveson is still very much an amateur wrestler, still, doing his whole thing and looking to go to, I believe it's the next Olympic Games.
Yes.
So his schedule can't be NXT every week or every other week or whatever else. So I don't think we'll see some big debut and a long run and all the rest of it. It's only going to be time after time we may see him. So there is time. Of course, there is still time for us to, get this whole thing cooking and have this whole we're brothers but we're not brothers thing. It's almost like the other way around of Kane and Undertaker. It's so weird.
Yeah,
it's so weird. But we are where we are, and it is what it is. Still sticking with NXT. We actually did see a debut on NXT TV of Kelani Jordan. For those who don't know, Kelani Jordan was signed to, I believe, the Neil program, or actually no, she had a tryout back in just before SummerSlam in Nashville last year. Made her NXT TV debut. It's not the first time anyone's seen her. She has been on Level Up. I believe she's done NXT live shows as well in her time. But she faced Tatum Paxley, got a surprise win, a bit out of nowhere. But she's been flanked by Dana Brooke, who is somewhat still trying to find her way after like 20 years in the WWE. But Kelani Jordan thought, I could maybe learn some stuff from her. Yeah. So this is where we are. Kelani Jordan, just to give you a little bit of a background as well of who she is real name Leah Mitchell. She's well known for her gymnastics at college level. She's come from Michigan State, one of the most decorated gymnasts from that university, and over the last few years in college. On the college scene, as I said before, she has been in the ring in NXT before. She's faced Zoe Stark and Cora Jade, who she had a bit of a thing with as well last night. And as I said, she defeated Tatum Paxley. Mex, what do you think? It's very, very early, but what do you think of the young Kehlani Jordan?
Yeah, I think they are looking at obviously the future, and I think especially where we've lost Sol Ruka, who kind of fit that baby face mold, gymnast kind of background as well, of athlete at least kind of background. Yeah, she's kind of found her way into that slot right now, and as long as she can thrive and adapt as quick as Sol Ruka did, because no one can say that Sol Ruka never deserved her spot when she came in. Like, she took that with both hands, and unfortunately she got injured. Then yeah, she will be good. I mean, you rang off a lot of kind of accolades there that she's done beforehand. I mean, as they say, once you get to the WWE, clean slate, no one cares who you were before that, innit? So the work starts now. She's made a TV debut, which is excellent. It's the trick is to stay there now. We talk about some other names and stuff. Even with Dana Brooke that you mentioned, Dana Brooke's been on TV since about 2015. By hook or by crook, we're approaching 10 years of Dana Brooke on TV. So she's done something right, whether that's in front of the camera or behind, backstage. So I guess there is something she can actually learn from Dana Brooke in that aspect. First feud, Cora Jade, nothing to sneeze at. Cora Jade is seen as probably one of the top heels on NXT in the women's division, so it's a nice little position for her to be in. And yeah, it's just good to see a lot more. It seems to be at this level. I know we were talking about this a couple of weeks back, the three of us, that who's the next kind of person and to kind of get their shine. I think we'll talk about him being the main roster, but we identified that at this level in NXT there is a lot coming through, and it's good to see that black people as well can feel like they can get into wrestling in this day and age. There's a lot of role models. They're making that next step. TV is a massive step. That shouldn't be played down at all. So kudos to her, and yeah, hopefully this is the beginning of something special.
And to echo that statement as well, as I said, she had her tryout last year, just before SummerSlam. She's not even been doing this thing a year yet, and she's already had her debut. And it wasn't a small thing, if that makes sense. It might not have been against the biggest star in the women's division on NXT, but something was made of it. Again, she's being flanked by Dana Brooke, who has come from the main roster. However we want to see and maybe even joke about Dana Brooke's time and all the rest of it, it's still something. It's it's not just another lady in NXT that Kehlani has probably come up with and all that kind of stuff. So there's something there definitely, and coming from the accolades that she has in her college gymnastic days as well. Seems to be a lot of gymnasts quite recently. Especially in the women's, there's a lot of gymnasts. It's like that's where they're looking. That's what they're looking for. It's nice for that difference, and I've said it for so many years that obviously we see the men. We talked about Ricochet earlier, who do all these big moves, high flyers and stuff like that. But we've never really seen women doing that. We've seen a few coming from Japan, Io Sky, and a few others in the past. But for it to come from the Americans, we're talking about Kehlani, Sol Ruka. There's another girl who debuted quite recently. I can't remember her name, but she looks like she's gonna do well. We can even mention Aaliyah James, who I'm kind of feeling is slowly making her way onto NXT TV, because quite recently she's been posting a lot more about her wrestling. She hasn't done that in a very long time, very, very long time. And then obviously we've got Katana Chance, who was also, who was on Raw and with Caden Carter as well. So the gymnast thing seems to be a bit of a thing in the Performance Center right now. Gerard, do you know any more about Kehlani Jordan, and how do you feel about her prospects in NXT?
In terms of Kehlani, I think it's kind of amazing to see what you said in terms of less than one full year from your tryout, and you're on WWE television. I mean, like we remember, you know, just looking at the story of, say, Johnny Gargano, how long it took from him from the tryout phase to end up on WWE television. So I think we cannot underestimate or underemphasize how significant this is, because this is very significant to be trusted to end up on one of the 3 flagship shows of the WWE is a big deal. I also feel like, to your point about gymnasts, I feel like WWE has been kind of brilliant in, whether intentionally or stumbling upon this as a plug for the next great spot to find wrestlers, and particularly to go after this on the women's side. Obviously, on the men's side, that element of the high flyer has always been fun to watch, and it's always been kind of rare to see. But we don't have very many women, certainly stateside, that we can put that to. Kaylani looked great. Like, I can't get over how natural she looked, how fluid she looked in the ring. She didn't have that first match jitters kind of thing. And the things that she pulled off in a very, very smooth way. So, you know, in my head, I'm like, her and a Sol Ruka, whether they're a tag team or they end up in a battle against each other, I mean, that could really be something down the road. I think Kaylani has a very bright future. I'm going to love watching her growth and her development, because I think we're on the cusp, and I don't think people really appreciate seeing people in their early stages, you know, watching them as they're developing and as they're growing and as they're becoming. You know, one of the reasons we love a Bianca Belair now is because we saw her NXT rise. You know what I mean? That's why that matters to us so much. That's why same for Jade Cargill, who I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit later. When you get to see people from their start and see them break through and see them make it, it means a whole lot more than just waking up one day and they're on your television. So I think we are at that stage right now with Kaylani, and I think she's got a very bright future ahead of her. And I just hope and pray she stays injury-free, and we can get to really see all that's intended for her to happen.
It's beautiful to see, you know, another black female added to this whole spectrum now, especially in NXT. Obviously, we've got Jakara Jackson, Lash Legend. You know, we've seen Kaden Carter rise. You mentioned, obviously, Bianca Belair, her rise as well. But even right now in this NXT space, there are still quite a few. And for those who don't know, there are still quite a few more who still we haven't seen yet. I could probably name at least another 5 that we just haven't seen yet. So it's interesting. Not everyone makes it. Not everyone will get there. The same 5 that I could name, we probably won't never be able to say their name. It's a possibility. But just the fact that they're there right now is a beautiful thing. And as Mick said, you know, it's that whole thing of representation. Seeing other young black females who will get to see people like them. That wasn't the case. It would probably only be 2 or 3, Jazz, Jacqueline, and I don't know who else. You know what I mean? You know, obviously we then had, you know, Alicia Fox, Sasha Banks, Naomi, and a couple of others. But you know, it's a lot more common now, and it's a beautiful thing to see. Gerard mentioned her name already. So thank you for the segue, mate. We are moving our way to and our thoughts towards Jade Cargill now, who we haven't seen on AEW since her loss to Chris Statlander at Double or Nothing at the end of May. What's been interesting is that in the last couple of days, it's been the talk. Anything that Jade Cargill does is the talk of the whole internet anyway. But Jade Cargill, as I said, has been away for about 6 weeks now or more. And she tweeted pictures of her, you know, doing her own thing and nothing wrestling related, and alluded to the fact that, you know, she likes this non-wrestling life. At the moment, let's not get too far ahead of ourselves, but we'll get into it. It was followed by a fan or a tweeter. I don't know if it was a fan or not. Not everyone that comments on Jade stuff is a fan. Most of the time they're not, which is a problem. But they asked the question, will we see you in the ring or something along those lines? And she just simply replied, no. As I said, not everyone that comments on Jade stuff is a fan. We had a few negative tweeters who kind of did the whole, well, you're only famous because of AEW. She had to remind them, excuse me, if you people knew me before AEW even existed. Mm-hmm. You're only famous because you were in the match with Shaq. Hello, excuse me. It was me that brought Shaq to AEW. Let's not get it twisted. Right. And hit them with a few facts. Let's go back to this whole thing of Jade not being in the ring and not being, immediately enticed to return. Mex, what do you make of, I mean, it's something that we've spoken about before she even left. But what do you make of this whole thing with Jade not being in a rush to return to the ring?
Yeah, she should take her time. She's been on TV relatively consistently since 2021, maybe something like that, pandemic. Mm-hmm. So, carrying this title, to an extent, carrying the division, definitely from a point of an ambassador for the company. She's been doing all that work for the best part of a year, 18 months at this point. Mm-hmm. So it's a well-deserved rest. It's probably a bit of a reset as well. She will come back as Jade, but maybe the character will tweak a bit. She has to go hunting at this point. Before when she ascended to the top of the TBS division, if you like, the belt never existed, and it was a tournament, and she was the inaugural winner. Now she literally has to go hunting for whether it's the TBS title again or the world title, the women's world title. So different kind of prospect now, and I'm sure she'll probably be taking the time. She's making out like she's just doing a lot of chilling and resting and giving content to the people of her luxury lifestyle. But Jade for sure is probably working as well. Trying to get better, trying to improve, so that when she does come back, there's reason for her to still be in the conversation. There's reason for her to still be maybe propelled more into that world women's title scene, as opposed to any other option they could have for her. I'm sure she's not done with wrestling just like that, as it's being made out to believe she may be. This is just a well-deserved rest, reset, improvement period, development period of the character and the in-ring skills. And then, it'll be a big deal when she returns, almost like how it was a big deal when Statlander returned and, won the title off her. It'll be a big deal when Jade returns. And again, I'm just hoping that whatever they do put her in, they just kind of get it right. Early Jade to the TBS title, they were doing a lot of things right, hitting a lot of cylinders. I guess, like we've said before, she became crippled with the streak a bit. She became crippled with the fact Statlander wasn't around to beat her maybe earlier on. So yeah, take the time out, develop the division. When she comes back, make her the major player that she should be.
For sure. It's crazy to think that Jade taking time off means Jade's not coming back. I don't know if I've ever seen that in wrestling before, unless it was related to an injury. Gerard, is there something more that's going on here when it comes to a black female saying that she's not in a rush to come back, and all of a sudden, she's never coming back?
Here's what I think is happening. I don't think it's coincidental that we've seen what just happened with Mercedes. We've seen what just happened with Trinity. I really believe part of what's happening with Jade is, yes, the people knew her before AEW. I think right now, following this TBS title run, she's seeing a lot more mainstream opportunities than she did prior to. I don't think that's deniable at all. And I think in the process of that, she's going, celebrity is interesting to me. You know what I mean? What can I do in this space of celebrity? And, she's been an athlete all of her life. So, she's been in competition all of her life. The question now is, okay, do I want to continue to do this at AEW, or do I want to fully pursue being the celebrity that I am? She ran into you want to talk about timing, being so important. She was the person, I think when AEW wrote this whole thing out and had Britt Baker debut as the first female signed to the company, the plan was Britt Baker was supposed to be the Jade Cargill that Jade Cargill is.
Right.
Nobody saw Jade Cargill coming like this. And they did not expect that a title that was supposed to be the mid-card title would become the title everybody was after, which is why they did not develop that mid-card division as strong as they needed to. Honestly, Jade does need to be away right now. And it's not even so much so Jade's skills can improve as much as it is they can actually have some folks for her to actually battle when she gets back. If there aren't people, and honestly, the question is, how long will it take for that? Right? Do we need to get titles off of Athena and Willow to have some interesting matches right now for her? Does Diamante need to be able to do something more? Who are the people that could actually fight Jade and give Jade a run for her money? The other question Jade has to ask is, have I done all that I can do with AEW? Like, let's think about it. She became the biggest female star in the company without winning the world title. So what would winning the world title for her do? Will it elevate her? Let's be honest. The AEW Women's World Champion at no point has been somebody that has represented the company mainstream. Go through all the champions. Not one of them has been a mainstream star. Not one. So it makes you wonder, is there a lure or a need for the AEW Women's World Championship to elevate Jade in a space that Jade's really interested in? From where I sit, I think Jade may be patterning her career after one Dwayne Johnson, who has spent more time outside of the ring than he has inside of the ring. And he was really one of the first to use pro wrestling as the stepping stone to Hollywood. Jade happens to be an anomaly unlike anything we've seen in wrestling, except for Bianca Belair, and they both happen to have shown up on our televisions at the same time. Thanks and praise be to God Almighty, right? Amen. Because we've never seen two Black women dominate pro wrestling at the same time. So I think those are the things that are all leading into asking, will Jade really come back? Because if we're honest, what else is there left for her to do?
Very, very true. And it is actually funny that you mentioned, obviously, the whole thing with Mercedes and Trinity as well, all happening. Of course, Jade had run into Trinity. I'm sure they've had more than the conversation that they had when we knew they were together. Right. Again, Bianca Belair as well, with how she's been and how her career, not just in the ring but outside of it, has been elevated and has progressed as well. There are so many questions that she could ask and so many options that she has that a Black female, let alone any female in wrestling in general, I guess, probably never really had, say, even just 3 years ago, right? Maybe even 2. So she has a lot to think about. She has time. It's nice for her to have a break. She needs a break. As Meg said, she's been on TV almost every week for the past 2 years or so. She's come into this whole thing completely fresh as well. This whole thing was new to her as well. She's got a small child. She's still got a husband and all the rest of it. There's so many things, so many questions that she has to think about and could answer, and so many answers that she has and ways to go. Do I think she's not going to come back? Not at all. She's going to come back in some way, shape, or form. Doesn't have to be immediately. She doesn't have to take a long time to come back. As you said, Gerard, it doesn't necessarily mean she has to work on her wrestling skills during this time. She has so many options, and I think that's the beauty of where she's at right now. We've only got a few minutes left of the show. This probably isn't the greatest way to end the show, but we're gonna go there because we know we wanted to speak on this from last week. So on Vice TV over in the States, we see the popular series Dark Side of the Ring. I believe we're in season 3 right now. Season 4. Wow. We go. Season 4. And I believe last week, the early part of last week, we had the story of the very popular wrestler that was Junkyard Dog, the WWE Hall of Famer, but a massively popular wrestler, one of the first big black wrestling stars, who was part of firstly Deep South Wrestling, but obviously we got to know him on a more popular scale in WWE. Gerard, I want you to kind of give us the story and what was shared on Dark Side of the Ring. Give us both the good, the not so good of the story of JYD.
You know, it's so interesting. Shows like this are so important, as we've talked before, because we do get to highlight the African-American wrestler. And I think when people are putting their Mount Rushmore together for black wrestling, a name that is not mentioned is the Junkyard Dog. We always talk about Ron Simmons because, you know, he was first world champion, and we talk about The Rock, you know, and then the other two names are interchangeable, right? Some might put Lashley there, some might put a few others there, but nobody ever puts the Junkyard Dog in this space. And what I thought was so good about the storytelling that happened for Dark Side of the Ring is they really did get to paint the picture of how big the Junkyard Dog was. They talked about what the era of wrestling looked like there in the late 70s, early 80s, where we're very much still in the territory days. And so you're talking Mid-South wrestling in the areas like Louisiana and Mississippi, which, for those who are unaware, in the United States, those areas heavy on the racism, like very, very heavy. So for a promoter to decide that I'm going to make an African-American man the top draw in this company was huge. That was major. No other promotion was really doing that, you know? And so if you had an African-American wrestler in that promotion or in any promotion, there was usually only room for one. You couldn't have two. And, you know, if you did, they weren't going to be your champion because you were concerned, would this person actually cross over and draw? So to have Junkyard Dog be a champion and the top draw in a space like Louisiana and Mississippi was a gutsy move, yet it worked. He had huge charisma. He was amazing. Think about it. This guy was main eventing the Superdome in New Orleans, right? Like, that's like ridiculously unheard of. It was crazy. And so he became the biggest star in that company, and in so doing, ultimately gets the call from Vince McMahon to come to WWE. He does. There's a bit of controversy in terms of how he does that, but he gets there. And when he gets there, again, think about this, one of the first black stars at a WrestleMania, right? Fighting for a championship. He fought Greg Valentine for the Intercontinental title. He was in a really, really big space. The problem was he never got used the same way he was used in Mid-South. So we never did see the Junkyard Dog main event, you know, a major pay-per-view, main event a WrestleMania, hold a championship. And that ultimately led to, you know, some dependency on drugs. And that ended up changing his career significantly. There was talk on the show about whether or not Vince McMahon was willing to give a black man the keys to the kingdom in the 80s. Right? I mean, Junkyard Dog was literally called the Hulk Hogan of the South before Hulk Hogan was Hulk Hogan, right? Like, he was that guy, and certainly could have, by many accounts, been the man in a national promotion. If you could be the man in a space like Louisiana and Mississippi, you could likely be the man in New York City, but he wasn't given that opportunity. It ended up in a really unfortunate spiral in terms of dependency on drugs and that type of thing. And he ultimately passed away as a result of a car accident from him driving from his daughter's graduation, back home, which was really, really unfortunate. But I think the Junkyard Dog, one of the most important African-American wrestlers, and we don't have the environment we're in right now without the Junkyard Dog. Hands down.
Very, very, very true. I mean, to also, make the point as well that even in WWE, when he wasn't used in the same way and wasn't as popular or, relatively as popular as he was in Mid-South, he was still one of the first to have an action figure.
Yes.
The first black wrestler to have an action figure.
Absolutely. In the cartoon.
Ended up in the cartoon at the height of the rock and wrestling thing with, alongside the likes of Iron Sheik, Hulk Hogan, Lou Albano, and all the other big guys, Randy Savage, Ricky Steamboat, Roddy Piper. I love that cartoon. I need to go and watch it again.
Yeah, I need to find it somewhere.
I need to find it somewhere. But Mex, growing up as black wrestling fans, and even to add to that, especially in the UK where wrestling just was nowhere near as popular, as in the US, how important is it for us now to know and understand the history of black wrestlers, for us to do what we do now?
It is very important for a lot of people, especially around the same kind of age group. Their knowledge of black wrestlers may start from The Rock, and even then people used to question, is The Rock black? So me, I guess I'm a tad older. I saw Ron Simmons somewhat, and all of these other guys, the Coco Bewares and JYDs, I just have to watch back now and see the impact that they laid. And I had been told before that Junkyard Dog was a draw. But it's just, I guess it just kind of, said in passing, oh, this guy was a big guy, so if he was a draw sort of thing. It's only on this documentary that I realized to the extent of, people coming to see him. And obviously they spoke about the scenario about the, I've heard the story before about, the whole him selling that he was blind. The free birds done, and someone turned up to a wrestling show with a gun ready to shoot for JYD, and it's like it's an absolute madness. Like, we get things of people jumping a barrier and all of that kind of behavior, which is all wrong, but bringing a gun ready to kill or harm people for someone, and this is when in the heat of kayfabe, everyone has to play the character. It's crazy, and that shows you, what a big star that was. Like Gerard was alluding to, even for a white man to come and want to kill for a black man, like it's unheard of. Like
even now.
Exactly. So it's me personally, I think I've told you guys before, I tend to stay away from the dark sides of the ring because I just want to separate maybe my fairy tale world, just wrestlers and who they really are. I don't often like, as the stories go, you start looking into their history, you're going to find something, and whether it's, some type of unjust, unlawful behavior or the use of drugs or whatever the case is, they tend to always end the same way. So I tend to stay away from the series. Being a black wrestler, that's why I thought, okay, this one's about the black wrestler. Let me tune in and see. And like I say, a lot of the stories I heard before, but it's important just to kind of know that these were, someone's hero. You're like, once upon a time, these were, the guys we enjoy the Mercedes and Bianca Belairs and the Lashleys of today. These were the people of that level, back then. So it's interesting to see their story and appreciate them. And you only wish that, the story ends differently. They were still around. It was good to see Tony Atlas and stuff on that documentary telling their stories. But, I guess not everyone gets the chance to turn their life around and stuff. So, rest in peace to Junkyard Dog. It was good to kind of see that even through a documentary, how revered he was in his time.
I want to say one thing real quick, because Tony Atlas made a quote that a lot of us in the States end up living by, but I don't know that any of us knew that pro wrestlers were told this, but I think it was Ernie Ladd who told a lot of the black wrestlers, and he had to remind, Junkyard Dog, listen, you can't do what the white man or the white wrestlers do and keep your job. And I thought that was so poignant because it's the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that we as black people in America have had to live by. You always had to
we live by it too.
well, there it is.
real.
You always had to be
For real.
twice as good as your counterparts,
Mhm.
and you could not do the same things that they did, because for them it's just, oh, they're just exploring and finding themselves, and for us, oh, this is who they were all along, and we don't get the opportunity to bounce back in the same way. And so I just thought that was so pivotal and powerful, and it's still true today, that some of the things that our Caucasian counterparts do, are looked at one way, but when African American counterparts do them, not the same.
Right. And even echoing that point as well is, I know for a fact that the three of us and anyone else who is in, whether they're, in the black wrestling space, whether they be wrestlers, whether they do the same thing as we do, whatever kind of iteration that they are in the space, that in order for us to be where we are, whether it's a popularity, whether we are, some level of consistency, even whether you're popular or not, we have to do more.
Absolutely.
We're standing around or working our asses off, trying to get to certain places that white counterparts, it feels like they're getting quicker than we are, and we're still doing what we're doing. We have to put in the extra work. We have to make sure our stuff is done to the highest of levels, even on the lowest of budgets, putting ourselves out, sacrificing and this, that way. Not to say that other people don't sacrifice, but at the same time, I'm sure if we were able to compare it in a tangible way, we would see a massive difference in what we're doing. So, while that was said then, it's not any different now. And it also kind of carries me to another point I was going to make on this whole thing as well, where, we sit here almost on a weekly basis and, talk about how representation's a bit low, and there probably isn't as much to talk about this week as there was a few weeks ago, and there's that consistency or dips and like a roller coaster of news in terms of the black wrestling space. But to think, imagine being a black wrestling fan 20, 30 years ago and only having one guy. And also you've got to think that one guy was in one state or one territory. So if you were a black person in Mississippi, you had Junkyard Dog. If you're a black person in New York, you had another person here. If you're in Mississippi, you wouldn't even know about the person in New York.
Right.
We didn't have the internet. We didn't have all that kind of stuff. And it was a lot more harder to find out about these things. Now, this isn't to say that we shouldn't make fuss about the lack of representation now, but at the same time, there is a level of us that needs to be very, very grateful for where we are now, and the fact that we can have this podcast, not because it's nice to talk and blah blah blah, but the fact that there is enough for us to talk about is just phenomenal on in its own right. On that note, guys, I would say this before saying goodbye. I would say this: it is very, very important for us to kind of look into the history of your passions, and obviously our passion right here is wrestling, and to look into our passions and understand where we're coming from to where we are now to where we want to be in the future. And if we can't do that, we're struggling. It's as simple as that. It's as simple as that. So on that note, make sure you continue to watch WrstlXtra. You've been watching WrstlXtra on the WrestleManiac UK YouTube channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe when this guy Mex posts all things WWE, AEW, and anything else in between. Don't forget, you can follow Mex at WrestleManiac.co.uk. I was about to say .com. Soon.
Yes.
Soon. Yes.
Future.
Yes.
Future.
Yes.
Then, now, forever together.
I see what you did there. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can follow Mex on WrestleManiac.uk on Instagram, WrestleManiac UK on Twitter. Also, don't forget to find this man on the Wrestling's channel as well. The great guys down south in London doing their thing here, there, and everywhere. So much things that they do content-wise and everything else. You can follow this guy, Gerard Bonner, everywhere on Bonafide, The Faction Show, WWT Live, the Nightmare Factory, Southern Honor Wrestling, Battle Slam, all the rest. I got there. Every week.
Yes.
I'm doing it. Yeah.
Yes.
Here, there, and everywhere. You can follow me, A Dazzle, on Black Wrestling Alliance on Instagram and BWA Dazzle on Twitter when I decide to make my appearances. I'm there less than Brock Lesnar is on WWE.
Funny. That's
guys,
funny.
This has been our show. I'm exhausted. That's why I'm rambling. It is time to go. Thank you for joining us. See you next time.
See you later.